Welcome to Redefining ABCD. So, hey everybody, welcome back. So, the first episode in season 3 is going to be a Larger Than Us. And the topic for us today is how India perceives America. So, a little bit what we'll be going into is like the perception of the US from an outside perspective and how that kind of affects our identity of balancing like Indian American in the American sides of our identity, and also flipping that and seeing how would it be in the future generations, just out of curiosity, and see what our thoughts kind of tell us or where they go. So I guess just to start us off, like, how do you think people outside of the U.S. perceive like America, like pre-COVID and post-COVID? Because I feel like those are very two different perceptions of America.
Yeah, I think I think post-COVID, and again, I can only really speak post-COVID about like people in India that I know, like relatives and like close family. And again, not all of them obviously, but like from what I my perception of what they how they view America is that we are the land of free, land of opportunity. Everything's going great, It's like we live in this like dreamland world place where everything just works out, and like we have a lot of privileges that we take for granted. I think they also have that perception. I like at least my relatives again, or not my relatives, but like some people that I know. And I think there is a underlying like sort of like America's great and they're kind of at the top, and in like India and like everything else at the bottom, and that's just how the world works. And like there's just like a level of like, that's the perception. And I think there's also, of course, like, oh, America's gonna give me more money, which is always great. And so there's also that level of like, oh, like, if it maybe it's not the land of opportunity and dreamland that I think of it as, but I think there's also, but at the same time there's money there, and that's their perception of it. I don't know if you had any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts about that, but
No, I kind of agree with you on that end of like the life in America is really romanticized. I think pre-COVID, before the pandemic, it was very like you said, it was like the land of opportunity. Like you, like even if you are like broke, you can make it, and that was like hope for a lot of people, like for a lot of immigrants. And I think that still goes. Like you can still make it, and you can still be successful because obviously we see like with immigrants. Um, but like all the underlying problems, like the systems in America and stuff, were kind of put like on a lower, like they were like hidden, you know. So everybody always assumed like life was perfect or life was good. And I feel like post COVID really brought out those underlying problems. Like it's really hard to adjust in America. Like racism is such a big thing here. Like even though yeah, cool, everybody from anywhere can come and like find a life for themselves. The con is that racism exists, and I don't think a lot of people like it doesn't hit them like extended family, because if you think about it, like when you're in India, you're only surrounded by Indians, so like racism is not on the forefront. But like obviously problems with like
well,
a
yeah.
mono like population. There are other problems like colorism and like sexism and whatnot. We a lot, but like racism is more prevalent. I feel like in the U.S. You know, so like, and they don't really have like a hand. I don't know if they like the experience of that or with like
Yeah.
diversity. I don't know if they can understand things like that.
I think racism is definitely a thing in India, but I think it's not. I think when people hear that, oh, America has racism and internalized issues like systemic issues, I think people in India, like, I don't want to generalize, but other like countries maybe, I think there is a tendency to think like, oh, but it can't be worse than here. It's got to be better than what we're experiencing here, if that makes any sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's better than the colorism that we experience here. America in that way. Like I think pre-pandemic there was that kind of underlying sort of like, I don't know, like, no, there's issues in America, but it's worse here kind of
Yeah.
attitude. And I think because of the pandemic and how America has dealt with the pandemic, and the whole the Trump 4 years and all that stuff, all that amazing things that happened in the last year. I think that maybe it hasn't like completely destroyed America's like, or what how America's perceived, but I think it's definitely like knocked us a couple of pegs down, like when it comes to like how the world views us, which is good. I think that was like a necessary thing that needed to happen. because it's not. I have a friend. You also know this friend, but I don't know if I should mention her name on this thing. But I was talking about this issue with one of my friends, and she described it as America as this giant cake, right? It has like multiple layers, but then the inside of the cake is just absolutely like there's so many underlying issues within that cake. Like it just doesn't taste good, but it looks good. It looks great from the outside, but like not so great when you start cutting into it and looking in. And I feel like
Yeah.
the underlying issues that America's had, I think we've just added layers and layers to that cake instead of actually trying to solve the issues. So like I don't know. I like also I saw a thing on Twitter the other day where it was like America's great, but America's only great because it has a great marketing team or something like that. And I was like,
That's actually
that's
genius. Like,
it makes sense.
wait, where do
I'm
you?
like, okay, that makes sense. So like, I don't know. I mean, I don't deny that that racism and all that stuff exists in India, but I think there's always this underlying kind of background sort of thought that's like, oh, but it's got to be better in America. It's got to be
Yeah,
better.
I get what you're saying. Like, standard of living does alter how you kind of look at things, and I'm sure like the poverty rate is, I'm sure, a lot worse in India. Seeing the standard of living here of like everybody has a smartphone, and it's most probably one of the newer smartphones. Everybody has a car, a nice house, so they mortgage off and stuff like that. They most probably are like, wow, you have these things, but there are so many
Mm-hmm.
underlying problems. Like I said, the grass is greener on the other side, but once you get there, you're like, oh shoot, there's a patch of like brown here. Oh, there's a patch of brown
Right,
here.
right.
And no, I think that's such an important thing of like empathy, and I think that's kind of what lacks when extended family or like people from India are just like, oh, you're from America, and then all these stigmas and stereotypes of views of Americans comes in the back of their head. Like, I can just as
Mm-hmm.
easy turn the tables and be like, oh, you're from India, all these things look like, I can do that, but I don't do that because I respect where you come from and your perspectives, and I think that's what's lacking. But I think post COVID, when all these issues kind of came to the forefront, people were seeing how like society really is in America and how it's hard to fit into a society where the majority white kind of the problems that like seep through society. Like even healthcare here is shit. I'm gonna be honest here. Like
Oh, it's
just like a lot
absolutely
like the bare bones like structures of America, there's a lot of flaws. I think there was very prevalent post COVID when you can see people like losing their jobs, getting in debt, or not even being able to like afford like a safe place to live. But I'm sure it's a lot worse in India. But like understanding that like everybody has some degree of problems. It's not always like pretty and sunshine and butterflies. I think that was really
right.
prevalent post COVID. And people saw the reality. So I think like the first half of the pandemic, when Trump didn't handle it that well, I
Mm.
think they were like, oh, thank God we're not in the US right now. Thank God we're in India. They have it worse. But at the same
All the
time, you know how India,
memes.
yeah. But at the same time, you know how like now India is now like in a pretty bad second wave because of everything going on over there. A lot of them had realized like the vaccine resources is a lot more readily available in the US. So they're like, oh, let's go to America now. So it kind of made me think like people just want to go to the other side when it's like more convenient for them. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, the vaccine, okay, that's a whole nother discussion to begin with, but like the whole vaccination gap and like all that stuff. I think what you said earlier, I think you said something about how our normal is privileged just naturally. I think like what we consider normal in America is naturally more privileged than some stuff that's happening in other countries. And in India, like, there like our just the fact that we get running water like immediately, again, not all parts of
Clean
America,
water
but
in
like where
most
we at,
areas. Yeah.
clean water, like we don't have to worry about like pollute like there's just little things that we just take for granted here that I think is just naturally within our everyday life. And I think when you live in India, you see those kind of things and you see that, and you're like, oh, of course they're going to have it better. And I think the issue is that I think there needs to be an understanding that like it's not about like the location, it's more about like I think we just need to start seeing India and America like this instead of like that. It's just not. Sorry, I'm like I'm doing hand gestures. Like I guess
Oh
for
yeah,
recording
it's
in
a
video though.
podcast.
Sorry, sorry. No, like I'm sorry. No, like we should see them as equal, as
Yeah.
both having issues, both having wins and losses and great things and bad things. I think the issue is that there's like a natural perception that America is better, and that's not. I don't like that. I don't like that, and I don't know how to
Hmm.
fix that. It's really annoying to have to, you know, be on this side, on the American side, and like I feel like I can't complain about certain things to my relatives and
Hmm.
stuff because like
Yeah.
like that just it just like feels like I'm taking things for granted, which I am in to some context, but also like I have issues too. Like I want to try to find some common ground. Like I'm trying really hard, but I
Yeah,
don't
it's like
know.
a guilt situation. Like you feel guilty for having like it's like I think people just have to realize it like it's the person's experience. Don't look at the
That too.
location, kind of like you said, because not
Hmm.
everybody in America is privileged. Like there's people that live
Yeah.
in Beverly Hills that are like billionaires, millionaires. There's people also like in Detroit, like not
Hmm.
having a good life because of the standard, like the living situation there for like a lot of minority communities. Even so, like you have to understand, like just as India has those types of problems, America does as well. So you should really just rather than like do like talking to your relatives, like your relatives, like saying these types of comments, you just kind of understand. Like you have to look at a person's experience, and I think that's where that change will come if people start
Yeah.
understanding. Like, let me empathize with that person's experience, rather than what the stigmas or stereotypes or what media shows America is like, because everybody's experience is different. Like even in India, I'm sure like everybody's view or of India or like society there is very different.
Yeah, no, and that's just like there's so many microcultures within India. There's so many microcultures within US. Like you really there's no way to tell how someone grew up without having to actually talk to them. Like I feel like there's like a tendency to generalize, and that just needs to there needs to
Oh
be
yeah,
like some we shouldn't be generalizing on both sides, I think.
yeah.
Also I was going to say I think that the whole idea of like poverty, I think poverty is so downplayed here in America, especially because I think poverty, from what we think of poverty, is very different than what poverty is here. I think here, if you're
Hmm.
living paycheck to paycheck and you're trying, like, that is the level of poverty here. Like, I think it's just different. Like the way poverty is viewed is different, and it's like I don't know. I don't know. It's just like a different
It's
way. Like
Yeah, it's like the similar
sorry.
mindset you said before. No, you're good. Like it's like the similar mindset that you said before of like, um, you guys might have it worse than me, so I don't want to talk about it. I think that's what it is because people are
Yeah.
like people are like in America. I feel people are like saying people outside of the U.S. have it worse than us. In
Yeah.
reality, homelessness is still a huge problem.
We have
Poverty,
issues here. Yeah. Yeah.
food stamps are a thing because there's so many problems with like food programs and stuff like that for like communities that are like minority communities that are just like thrown under the rug because them just being minority communities in like Republican states and whatnot in politics. So like, yeah, I agree with you. Like the bad is very downplayed here because everybody's like in this weird denial phase that like America is like the shimmering land where you can do whatever you want and like you can risk it all and still be really rich because people only hear the success stories of immigrants. Like I don't think I've
Yeah.
never heard like someone say, "Hey, I tried to go to the U.S. I with like $20 in my hand and a suitcase full of clothes. I ended
Right.
up getting in debt and had to go back to India." I don't think I've heard any of those stories because people only talk about their successes. So
Right.
like,
Right. Yep.
I think
Yeah.
that's also a perception.
I sorry to finish that thought. I think I just came. I re-remembered what I was trying. The point that I was trying to make. I was
Okay, yeah, yeah.
poverty just looks different here. That's what I was gonna try to. That was what I was trying to say before. Yes,
Yeah.
it just looks different. It still exists though. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just not what we imagine. Like I think Hollywood has really like trained our brain to think that poverty is only happens in third world countries. Only happens our quote unquote third world countries. Like I think it's just everyone's perception, and it should change. Is all I'm saying. I don't know.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can go to the next. Let me. Hmm. Okay. I was gonna say like after like because you mentioned a little bit about how. Well, we mentioned a little bit earlier about how like I guess that perception has kind of affected the way we view ourselves. So how do you think that perception of what other people think, or what people in India might see us as? How do you think that has affected how we view ourselves and evaluate our Indian and American side when we were younger and now as well?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Like I was thinking about it, and like I was thinking like when I was younger and we would go to India, a lot of the times our parents would be like privately be like, okay, like you have a nice life because we worked hard and we were able to, like, you have a nice life, and some of our relatives don't have as nice of a life as you do, so don't try to talk about it. Like if they ask you questions about America, deflect it. Just don't let the conversation go to that.
Right.
So I feel like that practice of like suppressing all those types of things when you were younger, like suppressing or like telling kids to filter out certain things and like think, like really think before you talk. And for family too, it's not just like strangers, like for your close family. That affected me a lot just because I felt like I could never really get close to family when I was younger because we had to have that filter in our mind, like, hey, if you say stuff like this, you could come off as arrogant, like even to your family.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think just that practice of suppressing it, like in India, when you go, you suppress that side of like the US side to your relatives. But then when you come back to the US, you have to suppress your Indian side because you just have to fit in society, like young, like as a younger kid in school. So it's just like constant suppression, like just to fit in was very confusing, I feel like, in the younger age. But I feel like now that I'm like a little bit more older and mature, I'm able to kind of understand where my parents come from. But at the same time, I feel like we should just be more open. Like I'm obviously not going to go tell them like, "Hey, yo, I live in America," and what, and like start like saying
Yeah,
random stuff
yeah.
like that. But like, it's like they should be understandable, and you like you're. I'm old enough now to kind of structure those conversations, I guess, so that I don't have to suppress everything or like hide it from like even your own family. You can still talk about it, but just the way you talk about it might be a little bit different. But I think that's what's kind of changed because being able to figure out how to talk about it and not like suppress it fully or put it into a box really does help you kind of figure out that balance or fluidity between Indian and American culture and how you want to kind of show that rather than like pushing it aside and like not trying to think about it. You have to like embrace it to see like what you
Yeah.
can do with it.
No, I had similar experiences when I was younger. Just like specifically like hiding, like wins, like even like wins and losses. I felt like I had to hide a little bit or downplay it a little bit. And I think like it's interesting. Like okay, example when I got into DAP, like the architecture school there, like art school. I had to like instead of saying I'm going into art school, I had to go I'm going into architecture school. And then they'll be like, oh, engineering. I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do that.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I totally get where they're coming from. Again, it's that cultural like difference. Like in India, like architecture specifically isn't really a major. So it's architectural engineering. So like, in their heads, like that makes sense. But I also don't have the time to sit there and explain like what's actually art school. I'm like, no, 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 let me just let you keep that. Um, just like little things too, like, like our house or like things that we're doing like gardening and like all that stuff, like there's certain things that we have to down I feel like I have to downplay because it comes off as again arrogant or like oh, you're from America, like, oh, you have all these things. I'm like, okay. But it's also the opposite, like, if it's not the fun things, it's also like the losses. I feel like I can't like really complain to them either with certain things because then it comes off again as, oh, like, what, like, why are you complaining, you have it better, like, all that stuff. So like it is interesting to see that, and I think again that was like more prevalent before. I think like and I think in the last couple of years it's like definitely changed into more of like, okay, I'm not going to suppress completely those sides of me. Like if I'm in India, I'm not going to suppress my American side altogether. I'm still going to show those sides, but I'm going to decide how much of that to show as opposed to the other. So like, I'm going to highlight the parts that you want to hear and then not downplay anything. I mean, if it comes out, it comes out, but highlight the ones that they want to see and then ignore everything else. Like
Like be
finding
more
ways to
open.
balance. Yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah.
finding more balance between the two. I think that's good. Like, I don't know. Because I always felt like I had to like completely shut it out, especially when I was really younger. I had to like really prove myself. Like, I am Indian. I'm going to wear Indian dress when I go to India. Even when all my cousins are wearing jeans and t-shirts, I'm going to wear an Indian dress
Exactly.
because I want
Yes.
to prove that I am just as Indian as you.
Like,
Like,
don't
it doesn't
disregard me,
work,
please.
but yeah, like I'm gonna speak fluent Tamil. I'm gonna try so hard. I'm gonna do all this thing. I'm gonna try so hard. I'm gonna try to fit in as much as possible. Obviously, it doesn't work ever, but I'm gonna try my hardest. But now I'm more at a point where like it's fine. You know, they come and it's whatever. It's fine.
I
Can't change
I
it.
feel that. I honestly,
Yeah.
I feel like that suppression. I always like seeing here all my friends like their grandparents would be like down the street or whatever, and then they
Yeah.
had such a close relationship with their family relatives, like where they would be open and talk in Thanksgiving. I would hear these stories. You'd also see them in movies and stuff, and I'd be like
Yeah.
very envious. I'd be very envious. I'd be like, why can't my family be like that? Because I felt like the suppression of like how it is here in America, like having to suppress that. I felt like I could never really be open or like connect with my family members, and they're like my family members. Why do we have to do like things like this? Is I never understood as a
Yeah.
kid, and I was like very jealous. I was like, I want to be close to my Indian relatives, just as my friends are with their like uncles, aunts, and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I was just very jealous and just upset. And then I think when I was older and able to kind of like filter or like talk about life here in a way that's like mature and appropriate or whatever, I feel like I was like when I like recently went to India pre-pandemic, I was able to get really close to like my video papiriamas and like my
Right.
annas
Right.
and stuff like that because I was able to have more like mature conversations with them, and they were kind of like understanding like, oh, okay, here these growing up like, oh, she's also dealt with things. She's just not some smiley kid who comes to India just for Bati's food and whatnot. Like she
Right.
went through
Right.
stuff too, and they can empathize more and they can understand. And so I think they kind of realize that once you get older. But I feel like you don't have to go through the struggles when you're younger to do that. I feel like you should. I don't know. The
Yeah. No,
suppression
I
is the
agree.
cause of all problems.
No, I agree. No, I was gonna say I think definitely as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at like knowing how to find common ground with them, and I think that just comes with having more life experiences to go off of too. Like, you know, going to college, like there's bound to be some overlap in like going to college in India and going to college here, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's still like you got to move to the hostel, you have to go find your roommates, you'll have like all like everything is very similar. So there like I've found ways to like find common ground with them as I've gotten older, and I think that's helped a lot as well. Like you said, so that's good. It's a good thing. It feels good to finally like be able to time. Also, like movies and TV show, movies, music, all that stuff also helps a lot. Not that I
Yeah,
can hold a
definitely.
proper conversation about Tamil movies, but I can do it in bits and pieces. I can be like, "Oh, I watched that one movie a long time ago. What do you think about it?" And they'll be like, "Oh, let's go." I'm like, "Yes, I found it. I found a thing to talk about." I don't know.
No, I
Yeah.
feel that. I feel that definitely. Like whenever you go to like Indian functions, I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
stress.
No, also, I mean, on that note, I think we are very privileged because we have the whole Tamil Sangam. We're both of us are part of this giant. It's called GCTS Tamil Sangam, or Tamil School. Essentially, it's like where we learned our language and like it's kind of like Mandarin school, but like for Tamil people. And we also have like cultural events, and our families are super involved in this program. So you know, we also had a good touch base with Indian culture when we were here. So that's also a good, like, kind of starting point to discuss with family back home, which is always great.
But
Always good.
yeah, I feel like we were able to be put in their shoes to some extent to see how they do like Pongal, Holi,
Yeah.
and whatnot, just because of the experiences we grew up in, which I think that's super important. Like you're right. I feel like if we didn't have those experiences and we came from like a really white place and having to go to India every 3 years to meet family, I feel like there would be even more disconnects. Like I can't imagine people who are in that situation having to go and feel like completely like an outsider.
Yeah.
And not knowing where like to start to fit in when they go to India. Like
Hmm.
I can't imagine that.
Yeah. So it's good. We've come far.
Thanks, mom and dad.
Right? Thanks. Never appreciated when I was younger, but I am now, I promise.
Hopefully, you're listening to this podcast.
I don't know.
But anyways, going back to kind of the perception of America, how do you think the perception of the U.S. being like the land of opportunities kind of affects the relationship our parents have with extended family? Because I'm sure it's a lot harder for them because they firsthand the experience culture shifts and having that survival mindset we always talk about in our episodes, like it's really hard. Like,
Right. No. I mean, yeah, we always like complain about how we're always stuck between two worlds and all that stuff. And like what I've been really thinking about recently is like my I think my mom made an offhanded comment about like what's the word for someone who's come from another country and have been since like completely distanced from that country, like
mm-hmm.
culturally speaking, like what is there a word for that? And I was like, "Huh, like I never really thought about it. I guess you guys are kind of in the same boat now, especially in terms of certain things." And this really came up when we were there was a wedding, a wedding in our family friend group that all the aunties are planning, and it was a wedding. It was an interracial wedding, right? So there was both. They had to. They were in charge of the Tamil side of the wedding, and I was like, you know, part. I wasn't part of the plans, but I was hearing how they were planning this event, and my mom was going like, "Oh, you know, like we don't know as much about wedding planning in Tamil weddings, especially like because we never had to do that, you know, our parents did that for us. So there's a lot of like little cultural religious things that we just don't know what we're doing. Like we don't know how to plan this wedding basically. And it involves so much research and planning and thinking about it and looking it up and all this stuff. And I just never thought about the fact that they also would have that disconnect from, you know, from India now that they've been here for what 20 plus years. I don't know if you had any thoughts
Yeah.
about that.
No, they're like in their own version of a quote unquote ABCD. I hate to use that term because I know our podcast
Right,
is whole about shifting that mentality, but like they're like that too. Like
right.
you grew up like even though yeah you were born and you grew up in India, you were in America for like more of your life, or the part of their life that they were in America was like when they were finding their individual identity more than they when they were in India. So like they feel more like comfortable here now that they've kind of adjusted to that time period and raised kids here and whatnot. So I get that. That's like a good point you bring up. Yeah,
It's
but
difficult, and I don't know. It's very difficult, and I don't know. I think that also ties into like how they talk to extended family and relatives now, like just like
mm-hmm.
us, you know, like you mentioned how your mom had to like tell you like, oh, you know, filter out some of the stuff that you say, don't talk about America. All this. Like they also have to do that now, you know, like they're also kind of have to think about how they phrase things and they have to suppress a little bit of their American lifestyle when
Mm-hmm.
talking to Indian extended family and stuff. So I don't know. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
not even that. Like if they're having a hard time here, I don't know how they like. How do you tell that to your parents that are in India that don't really know American culture? Like what if they're having like a hard time at work because of like some issue that's not really understandable or like could carry over in like an Indian culture or society? Like how do you get through that? I feel like they have to go. It's like a lot of loneliness. I think
Yeah.
with that disconnect. I was kind of thinking about it. Like my dad always like whenever we were younger, he'd always be like, "Back in my day, when I first came to this country with $100 and 4 pairs of clothes," you know, always like tell his story of how he came to the U.S. because he like wants us to be appreciative of what we have when we were younger. But I think what like really resonated was when he told his story was like he was like I like my parents gave all their life savings so I could go and be adventure a new country. So that sense of failure was really important. Like that was one of like his biggest worries when he first came to the US because like he can't use all that money and then go back like as like in the sense of like I have failed because like that was how important like succeeding in America was for him because he's like the pride that his family and like, the trust that his family put in him to succeed in America, like it was just the pressure of that was too much. And I can't imagine having to go through that because you're like going to a new country, you're trying to like adjust to that society, but then like you have no one to talk to because you can't tell like I'm having a hard time to your parents because they gave their life savings or like they like gave you everything so that you could do well in another country. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's difficult. It's very
a lot
yeah.
of people have told them like you have such a good life here in India. Like why do you want to move to America? Like why do you want to change? Like you can get your master's
Right.
degree here. You can get a nice cushy job here. Like why do the extra work and work hard to go to America? Like no one could understand that, which I thought was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah, it's like super I don't know. It's very it's hard to tell like how America's actually perceived like in the like holistically speaking because I feel like so many people have different views on that, and like different reasons for why they want to come to America or why they don't want to come to America or whatever, and like vice versa. So like I don't know, it's very difficult.
Yeah, and I feel like the experiences that I've heard in my family, like they were all like for white collar jobs, like or backgrounds where like they're going into America for like an engineering position or like
Yeah.
higher studies. I can't imagine how it would be for like blue collar jobs. I was just thinking about this because like I was thinking about Subreet's book, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking about I was reading. I finished her book. I think when she gave it to us, and I was just thinking like it was very like she was very vulnerable and open about her experiences and even her parents' experiences, and it's just like I can't imagine like both of her parents had like education and stuff like that, but they had ended up coming here and having to struggle as blue collar jobs. Like that experience also is a whole other like thing that we can't really relate to. I mean, I personally can't relate to because a lot of
No,
my
yeah,
families who've
no.
told me experiences were all for white collar jobs. So I'm like, I guess it's really hard to like kind of judge that. Like I feel like that's like going back to like extended family really don't see the reality of the hardships. Like even if you're super successful in India and you want to venture out and explore and see how well you can do it in America, like anything can happen. And I feel like they don't really understand that because one, our parents are not going to tell them because why would you talk like no one talks about their failures or like their hardships.
Right,
So
right.
it's like once again that disconnect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very yeah. I was gonna say yeah. You're right. Like when we talk to people in India, like we're not gonna talk about like oh America sucks. Like don't come here. Don't do it. Especially if
I'm
they're
having
planning
such a
to
hard
move here.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're planning to move here. Like I'm not gonna like I'm gonna talk about the good things because whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Okay, moving on to the last question that we had because um I think we're running a little bit short on time. But if we want to, so now let's flip the conversation. How do you think our children or the next generation of South Asian Americans will perceive India? Do you think
Mhm.
that'll change? Like how much? Like I feel like that disconnect's going to get wider. Like can you take what's going to change? What's going to stay the same? Basically.
So I honestly believe that it depends on like individuals situations. Just because I think like the dictating factor is that how often we go back to India. Just because like when we flip the tables and ask our future kids like to understand how life is in India, they're going to be in a similar situation of how our extended family looks at us right now. I feel like where their views are going to be shaped more by media than personal experiences of what it looks like to be on the other side of the fence. Um, and so I think ultimately it really does depend on if like personally for me, I was like telling this like personally for me, I'm not going to go back to India often if none of my family is there anymore. I don't know if that makes like it's not, I don't want that to happen. Like knock on wood, I hope everybody's okay. But like I'm not going
Right.
to visit as much because there's not a need to anymore because family's not there. I feel like we're just going to go there like tourists then at that point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like if that ends up happening, our kids, the way that they see India is gonna, that disconnect, like you said, is gonna get bigger because the views and they were not going to be able to shape their own views or perspectives of India. But like if we go there continuously, even if there is no family, I feel like that they'll be able to kind of see the true view or like some experience of India, and that could still kind of be like what is passed down and have our kids tell your kids like so tell our kids to tell their kids who to continue to go to India to still experience like where their roots are because ultimately like if you look at a family tree it all starts in India even if you're like American and ingrained that I feel like that's what's going to keep us going generation to generation.
Right. No, I agree. And I think like you said, like it does come with um well, okay. One, when you said that all of our family is not going to be there, we'll have cousins, I assure you. We'll have cousins and their family to go hang out with in India. This I don't think we'll ever not have relatives in India ever, but I think like yeah, like you said, like if like if we just like make it a habit to like, go and like show India and allow for the next generation of kids to like see that side, like them experiencing India themselves as opposed to consuming it in media. I think that's a good like a huge step in the right direction, at least in my head, to like kind of shorten that gap a little bit, because that gap is going to always be there, I feel like. um we can either like, allow that gap to just stay where it's at, or like make it wider, or
Hmm.
like make it keep going wider, which isn't that
Yeah.
great. So, like it's like a curve. Like as long as we keep them, interested, and keep them going to India, and not even just, maybe not even just going to India, going and getting a flight ticket in India or to India might even become a privilege. Like it is a privilege to go there every 2 years and visit. If that's not even something that is possible, to at least get people interested in Indian culture, and keep the next generation interested, in learning their roots and all that stuff. I think that'll help a lot,
You're
um,
right.
with that, with at least keeping that gap where it's at, so it's not, making it worse.
Yeah, like you bring up a really good point. Like even just like rather than like doing the effort of going there, like doing the effort of investing in like language schools, cultural events here, so that people that don't have
Yeah,
the opportunity to go to India as frequently, like you said, can still help them immerse themselves in Indian culture and see what it means a little bit, just like a glimpse of what it means to be Indian. And I think like you're totally right. Like as much as we invest in going over there and staying in touch with our family and our culture and religion, we should do the same here. Maybe I feel like it'll be more prevalent, or like that disconnect will be less if we ingrain it more in our lifestyle, and that comes with being
yeah.
part of being proud of that Indian side of your identity, I feel.
Yeah, and like, and not just like cultural events and stuff, because obviously it is important to like also kind, not important, but like, also ingrain them in cultural schools and all that stuff, but also like thinking about like, just like subscribe to Sun TV. Why not? Like just have it, like have that option. Like, you know what I mean? Like subscribe to Sun TV, listen to like Radio Mirchi, like
I'm just
just
thinking about the Indian news. Like, have you
yeah,
seen the
no,
Tamil news?
like
It sounds like they're rappers, like they talk so
yeah.
fast. Oh my god.
And
Sorry,
like
keep going.
sutta Tamil, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like like it doesn't have to be that, even that drastic. Like at least do so, like something to like have some sort of connection to the original like Indian roots, like OG fam, like
Watch some
I don't
Vivek
know.
movies, R.I.P.
Oh God.
Or like Bunny Vale, just get all the Indian skits out. Yes.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be drastic. Doesn't have to be like, because it's also a privilege to have this many Indian people around us. Like I realize that,
True,
like
true.
we live in a very like very Indian community. Like everyone is Indian, which is great. It's awesome. But I think we take that for granted a little bit. Like just simple
Hmm.
things, like listen to a podcast that's like created by South Asian people, or created by South Asian people in India. Like or like, I don't know. I think there's ways to work around and keep that gap where it's at, or even shorten it in the future, as long as there's still an interest to keep the culture alive and like keep it, relevant, and relevant to our modern day lives in America. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's good. I think there is a positive side to this conversation for sure.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we have to definitely focus on the positives. You can't. I agree with you. But that reminded me of the season one episode we did with Asia, because she was saying
Yeah.
like that exact same thing in her like purview, because like she was in a situation in Mason where there were not that many black people in the community, because and like so representation or being confident in her like identity as like a black person was really hard. And so she said ways that she kind of was able to get back to that side of her identity was by like filling her social media with like influencers and like within their community, watching like movies that have representation, and just kind of engulfing yourself into your community through media was a great way of her to still feel connected to that side of her identity. So I think like if it ever does come to the situation where our kids or their future kids are going to be in a place where it's majority white, or like they're going to be the only Indian in the room, like that's one way they could kind of feel connected to their people or
Right,
like to their
right.
community.
No, actually, that brings up a good point. Are they going to be the only Indian person in the community, though? Our community is growing and growing and growing.
That's true.
By the time in the next generation, like maybe the POC in this country will be the majority. I mean, we already are. That's not true. I don't know. You know
Not
what I
in
mean?
all
Like,
places.
Well, but also like maybe in the future, like the media representation, like representation of South Asian people in the media and the Hollywood, maybe might be better. So that way, they also might have that connection. You know what I mean?
I see what
Like
you're saying.
I don't know. Like we don't know. We don't know how it's gonna go, but
But
hopefully
yeah.
Hollywood will keep up with its inclusion of Indian people in diverse ways in the future, and it's not just a
I
check mark,
mean,
but
I feel like you
I don't
don't really
know.
have to. You know, I feel like you don't really have to rely on Hollywood too. Like, not to
No,
say
I
like
know, I
it's gonna
know.
go bad, but like you can even watch like Tamil movies and stuff
Yeah,
for
yeah. No,
representation, or like
yeah.
Indian movies, like Bollywood. But also, I was just thinking about this. A lot of shows that I watch are Canadian TV, and Canadian TV is very
Mhm.
diverse. So like maybe kind of
Yeah.
engulfing yourself in other markets. So like not Hollywood, but like whatever Canadian TV is called.
Yeah,
I don't know what
yeah.
the is, but like,
Well, I just think like overall there's going to be more South Asian hyphenated identity representation in
yeah.
like on like television, film, movies across the board, like all over the world. Like I think there's going to be more of that hopefully in the future. So like as a kid watching consuming like it's not going to be like us when we were younger when the only like sort of Indian representation we knew was Mindy Kaling and Aziz Ansari and like maybe two others. Oh, that one kid from shoot, Jesse? Was it Jesse? It was Jesse.
Karan
I don't remember
Brar.
his name.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
he's our
Like
age, right?
yeah, like I think in the future there's gonna be more celebrities, icons, people, hopefully,
Hmm.
that younger kids can look at and see
You're
themselves in,
right.
hopefully. I don't
No,
know.
yeah, because I feel when we're younger, we're the first generation. A lot of people are first generation immigrant. Like, there's a lot of them out there. Like, I feel like now that we're at a stage where, like you said, there's going to be a lot more hyphenated identities in terms of like the wave of immigrants that came in our like in that generation. Their kids are going to be more prevalent. Like that's like this is like the time. So like, I definitely agree with you. I definitely think we'll see the diversity,
I hope
and not
so.
just
And I
in
think
not just like in like film and TV media, but I feel like in all industries. Because now I'm a lot of times now I'm seeing like a lot of Indian American CEOs, financial traders, startup investors, like all these things I've seen. Like I think Shark Tank, there's an Indian guy as one of the panelists to invest in startups, and I was like,
really,
represent. I don't know what
wow.
episode it was, but I was like, whoa, it's not all white people, okay.
That's new. When did that change? Yeah, no. I mean, okay, and like bringing it back to the conversation, so like hopefully that view, like those
Yeah,
views that we have of India, sorry, not to like get too off topic, but like because we have other episodes planned for this season, Keerthi, we can't release everything all
true,
at once, but
true.
we'll go into all these other things later. But going back to the conversation, like the whole like I think overall like kids in the future that are South Asian or have South Asian identities in their past will hopefully view India in a nicer light, or not a nicer light, but in a light that makes sense to them and is a positive light, hopefully, and it'll be great. Hopefully, that gap will shorten.
And I feel like now that we've learned kind of growing up, like the negative sides of like suppressing our identity in both
Hmm.
areas, we can tell our kids, hey, we learned the hard way. When you go to India, like feel free to be like how you can be yourself or be comfortable in your own skin. We'll be able to tell our kids a little bit more of that, and they'll have a I think
Hmm.
they'll have a more comfortable experience. It's kind of like the older child and younger child situation. Like the first
Yes,
sibling went through everything, they know what they're doing, so now the younger sibling can have a smoother ride because the older one
right,
fought all the battles. It'll be similar to that. Like we went through everything, we understand because we were are in similar positions, so we'll be able to like help them, nurture them in a way that it's more comfortable.
right, right. No, it's good. All right, I think it's a good place to stop, right? I
Yeah,
don't know
I
how to
mean,
outro this. How do we
just
outro
yeah, just
this?
end it, girl. Just end it however you want.
Oh, I'm doing it. Oh shit,
Yeah,
I am doing it. Um, Okay. Well, on that happy note, we will end this conversation. It was really fun talking to Kirti. This is really great. We're gonna do more of this style in the future, like style of podcasting in the future. So this will be exciting. Hopefully, you as the viewers can see us as ourselves. Hopefully, which is good. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next Brown Art Network segment.
yeah. We hope you guys enjoyed our conversation today and really like resonated with you to kind of reflect in your personal experience of how it is in America and in India. All right. We'll see you all on the next one.